Hey, my YouTube family, welcome back to another episode of Selfish Therapy. I'm your host, Lyrae. On this channel, we talk about any and everything self therapy. So if you are not ready to do the work, this may not be the channel for you. Guys, thank you again. Happy Saturday to you. If you haven't seen the last video, please make sure that you go ahead and watch it. Remember that you guys show your support to me by subscribing and turning on your notification bell. So whenever I post new content, you guys are notified first. As well, if you do like the videos, leave me a thumbs up. Drop a comment. Let me hear what your thoughts are on the topic. Interact with me, guys. All right. So with that said, today we're going to be talking about communication. How do we develop our communication skills? I think that's a part of your overall self-development. So we're going to get into that today. So if you want to hear, stay tuned. So guys, if you're still here with me, that means you're interested to hear about this topic. I feel like communication is such a huge part of our just entire being, right? When we talk about communication, it's not just about verbal communication, it is nonverbal as well. And I feel like sometimes we pay more attention to the verbal. It's very easy to get to lapse in our judgment when it comes to our nonverbal communication. So I just wanted to talk about that overall, right? I work in a professional environment, and I can't tell you how often people are saying all the right things, but their actions, their gestures are just completely completely off, and it's just not matching what they're saying out of their mouth. And people have to understand a huge piece of getting your point across, a huge piece of people receiving what you're saying, right? So let's talk through some things. So let's start with the verbal communication. We definitely want to look at our tone. Is what we're saying clear? Is the person that we're saying it to, or the people that we're saying it to, can they understand, right? Is there clarity around what we're saying? The tone that you give off, or they always say it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? So the tone that you give off could alter the meaning, right? Maybe that's not what you intended, but the way how it was said is how it was received. We want to be mindful of how we are saying those things. We want to be mindful of our tone when we're saying it. We want to make sure that what we're saying is clear and concise, that people can understand it. If you were in that person's shoes, not knowing anything, if this is a person that is hearing this information for the first time, would you understand, right? So you do want to think about how you're communicating verbally and different ways of how you can get those points across. So also, it's the same thing with written communication. Both verbal and written communication, you want to know that you're using the right choice of words. You want to know that your tone is in the right, your tone is also right. One of the things I've found, especially being a part of a team, like a training team, is that you kind of have to alter. You have to understand your audience. You have to understand one, you have to be clear about what you want to get across, and two, you have to understand who you're talking to, right? How are they going to receive it? You need to know your audience and tailor your communication to that if your aim is for them to understand. So your words, don't go into a situation don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. Sometimes less is more, if that makes sense. Sometimes simple is best. Just how can I get this point across to you, so in the simplest, clearest form, easiest form for you to understand. I'm not here to complicate your life. I just need you to understand what I'm saying, right? So the excessive words, big words, or complicated words, it's just not necessary. That doesn't say, oh, I'm smart, right? If you're smart, you want to tailor your communication to your audience, because your goal is for them to understand, to receive what you're saying, and basically to retain it, right? So that's the goal. All right, so you want to make sure that you are looking at your audience and make sure that whatever it is that you're saying is in the simplest form, both written and verbal. You want to watch your tone, and you want to make sure that you're very clear on what you're saying. All right. So now that we've created some, put some context around verbal communication, verbal and written communication. Let's talk through some of the nonverbal. This is the one that usually gets swept under the rug. This is the one that I feel like is tied the most to our emotional intelligence, which that is, I feel like emotional intelligence has to be like a topic in itself. So I'm not even going to go into that, but just table that for now. So I feel like, so nonverbal communication is every communication that you do to communicate that is not verbal or written, right? So when you, if you're saying, or let me show you guys something. Oh, I love you. What do you get? Right? Now look, listen to this. I love you. I said the same exact thing. I probably mean the same exact thing. But how would you receive it? Which one would you receive better? Right? And I'm saying something beautiful. If you ask me, to love, for somebody to love you, it's a beautiful thing. And I see this a lot in relationships, like romantic relationships, where one party just feels like you're supposed to just understand what I'm saying. No matter how I said it, no matter what I did, you're supposed to just know what I mean, right? Another story for another day. But I'm saying that to say to you is, your expressions matter, your emotions matter. You don't want to be in, whether your personal life or your professional life, you don't ever want to be in a situation where your gestures send the wrong message, right? I see this a lot where the hardest thing for them to do is to communicate, because everybody's receiving, everybody's so sensitive, and rightfully so, and you're receiving what the other person is saying completely different, right? So, and it could be, a lot of the times, it's the way that it's said, the way how the slouching, depending on where you are, you're slouching, I have my facial expressions is my weakness, right? So I'm not, the pot is not calling the kettle black. I still have work to do. Depending on who I'm around, I might show it more than others, right? Than other times. But I'm just saying, I still have that, something that I'm working on. Another thing is, when I realize when I get nervous, I fumble sometimes. Like, depending on what team or who I'm talking to, or when I get upset, it's hard to bring out my words. And that's something that I've been working a lot on. So don't take this as I got it together. No, I don't. I still have work to do. But I've been researching. I figured, why not share it, right? So I feel like your nonverbal cues, your nonverbal cues actually speaks volume, right? It says a lot about what you're trying to say, and it plays a huge part in how your message is received, right? So there're just certain things that you want to make sure that you're mindful of when you are communicating. Again, you must know your audience and know what you're trying to put out. What's your expectation of that conversation or that communication? And then make sure that you're tailoring what you're saying, how you're saying it, and your all your gestures, your expressions, while you're saying it, right? Make sure that they're matching, and we shouldn't have any confusion in that communication. Make sense? Okay. So now let's jump on over the next one, which is a huge one that I don't believe most people we still have a grasp yet, right? We still don't have the grasp on that. Is active listening. What is active listening? Right? When you are communicating or you're having a conversation, let's say that you're having a conversation with someone, what often happens especially in a debate or a disagreement, both parties, everybody that's involved, just want to be heard. But nobody wants to really listen. They think they want to listen. They think they're listening, but they're really not. So what will happen is they hear something and they tailor that to responding. So they listen to respond, not to understand. And that oftentimes is a huge communication barrier to come to a resolution or an understanding between any two people that's communicating, because we're not listening to really understand what the other person is saying. We're mostly listening to respond. And that's where the huge issue is. We listen, or we think we heard clearly, but what that does is you pick the things that you want to hear. Selective listening, or selective hearing, I think it's called. Where you just pick what you want and then you respond to that, and you completely disregard everything else. Had you listened actively, you would have gotten the full understanding, possibly really understand what this person is saying, rather than hearing the parts that you want to hear, picking the negative pieces out of it most of the time, and running with that. That became your argument, when in truth and in fact that wasn't really the issue, right? Sometimes, especially in a disagreement in romantic relationships, right, and a couple is arguing, a lot of the times the other person is saying, simply down flat, the other person is saying, you did something, I don't like what you did, this is how it made me feel. But those words are not received. So the way how it was said, how it was communicated to their partner to say, you hurt me, it doesn't come out that way, right? And sometimes it is being said that way, and the partner, is not hearing it that way. They heard something, you are wrong, and they have to defend that they're not wrong. Not the part that what you did hurt me. Get what I'm saying? Hope I'm making some sense here. But my point around this is, is just that it is active listening is just as important as speaking in a conversation, right? Or in communicating. Equal importance. Or else the whole point of the conversation is gonna go down the rabbit hole. All right. So how do we practice active listening? So let's talk about some of the things. It says you want to make sure that you're giving your undivided attention to the speaker. Undivided means you're focused on what the speaker is saying. You're open, with an open mind, open ear. You're listening to understand what they're communicating. All right. And as I said, undivided, there's no distractions. Don't come in with sometimes coming in with your preset notions also block you from really listening actively or aiming for understanding, right? It's almost like you're coming prepared to defend versus to really understand. Make sense? You also want to avoid any temptation to interrupt, right? I will tell you guys that I have that problem. That's something that I'm actively working on as well, because sometimes you hear things and you don't want to forget because you want to respond. That part might have rubbed you the wrong way, or maybe you just feel like, okay, before I forget, I need to respond to this, right? But it kind of throws the speaker off, sometimes discourages them to continue speaking, depending on the nature of the conversation. So yeah, try your hardest. If you don't have to, maybe get a pen, depending on what the conversation about or what the setting is. Write down your points, and then come back to them when it's time for you to ask those questions, right? Another thing that you want to do is, if you want to clarify. So it's okay in a conversation to say, so what I'm hearing is, or just so that I understand, what you're saying is this, that. That's you heard it, but you want to clarify to make sure that you're understanding it correctly. So you're asking them to clarify that for you. Make sense? Okay. So you definitely want to keep that. It's okay to rephrase it as well. If somebody's saying something to you, you have some sort of understanding of what they're saying, but you're not 100% sure, you say it in different ways. Well, how do you understand it? That's okay. That's another way for you to try to clarify, to make sure that what the person is saying or what you heard is what you're truly understanding. Nothing is wrong with you writing down what you thought you heard, and then you ask the question you ask. Nothing is wrong with asking. That is you putting your foot forward, or your effort to say, make sure I understand this before I respond, right? And then the final thing I want to talk about, which I am not going to go into details about because I'm going to talk through it on, it's going to have its separate segment or episode, is your emotional intelligence. Listen, emotional intelligence plays such a huge part in how we communicate daily. It plays such a huge part in how we develop our communication skills professionally and personally. And I want you guys to take some time, look into, do some research and see, right? And then look at yourself and see what are some of the areas of emotional intelligence that I can actually work on or factor in, right? Because sometimes we're just not paying attention. We just do what comes natural to us. And sometimes that is being triggered by what emotion we're feeling at that time. That could determine how our communication come across to the other person. And it plays a huge part. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Because like I said, we're going to go into more depths on the actual, when we get on that actual topic, to talk through some more. But guys, I'm going to drop a link into the description of this video so that you can go and read some more about this topic that we spoke about today. There's a ton of information on the web. There are books out there. There's so many things that you can do. Lots of videos. There's numerous YouTube videos as well that you guys can watch to get more information on how you can develop your communication skills. But with that said, I'm going to love you guys and leave you. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. Drop a comment. Let me hear what your thoughts are or what you'd like to hear me talk about. But with that said, guys, I'm going to leave you until the next episode. Bye for now.